on what's happening with the NDAA, that is the National Defense Authorization Act, and this is for year 2022. It's the Pentagon funding bill, and this year it's being passed quite late in the year, actually, and we're seeing right now a holdup in the Senate. I had talked on the show last week, Connor, and expected that the Senate would have actually passed the bill by now. I think they wanted to have it done by Thanksgiving, but there was a slight hiccup last week that involved Senator Schumer putting another $250 million bill in with the NDAA. That's like the China Competition Act. It's $200 million for research and development and all these other kind of things that they want to spend money on. And the Republicans are actually for that bill, I believe. They were just upset with some of the language that Schumer changed. So Schumer backed out of that, and now we were back on track for having the NDAA pass this week. However, there were some issues with some Republicans being upset that their amendments weren't going to get votes, and have been holding up the process. Now, the Democrats are saying the Republicans are acting in bad faith, but some of these, things that the Congress wants to vote on, I think does kind of make sense. Looking for a vote on the Pentagon's enforcement, Biden's vaccine mandate on defense contractors, since Congress allocates where that money goes. Doesn't seem unreasonable that they would at least have a vote on it. Unfortunately, Senators Rich and Cruz are looking for a vote on sanctions to the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Senators Daines and Langford won votes on immigration and border wall measures, and Marco Rubio, of course, the major China hawk, is demanding a vote to bar goods imported from China made by forced labor. I'm sure it's mostly just a propaganda piece and in no way actually about improving human rights in China whatsoever. And those are just some of the amendments that aren't getting votes. In total, there are 900 amendments proposed, and so you can see some kind of reasonableness where at some point they can allow a vote on everything. However, I'm guessing there's a bunch of overlapping ideas. Now, I had talked on the last show and brought up some of the amendments to the NDAA that will get votes, including probably the most important, I think, which is Josh Hawley's amendment to have women either register for the draft or not. And, he's, of course, advocating against it. The current Senate bill has that provision in. He's trying to strip it out. But also there's important things like $25 billion for shipyards. Connor, most of the time the things being voted on aren't great. There are amendments to make it more hawkish, like Cotton wants the U.S. to write a whole bunch of papers on how we need to end our reliance on rare earth minerals. But there are things in here that actually are probably really important to include in the bill. There's one that's promoted by Senators Cruz and Gillibrand that's going to allow students studying at military academies to not have to give up their parental rights to remain students. This has to be the most absurd thing that I ever heard, and can't believe it's policy. I guess if you're like a student at a U.S. military academy and I'm sure when the policy was made, there weren't women there, so it was a man, getting a woman pregnant, that you wouldn't actually be able to have parental rights until you were out of the academy. I mean, it's an absurd thing to ask somebody to give up, especially now that there's so many women being admitted and everything like that. I'm sure, really encourages them just probably not to follow through with the pregnancy or something like that. But, taking that out of law seems like a really good policy. There's other terrible things. Mark Warner's worried about extremism in the ranks. More concern about Afghanistan, election security. Some people looking to actually restrict what is going to local police departments from the military. Votes again on this one. Cuba, Senator Risch wants to keep Cuba on the terrorism list. So, me and Connor could talk all day about our feelings on each one of these issues and everything, but just understand that this is all going into one giant $800 billion-ish funding bill for the Pentagon for a single year. It's just absolutely absurd to legislate in this manner. Now, one more thing from the NDAA I really want to highlight is this new act that there's several veterans groups that are worried about will be dropped out of the bill, and it's actually gotten a little bit of Pentagon support. But this new resolution here, Connor, is called the Improving Justice in Military Act, and what it will do is if you commit a felony in the military, that's not going to be handled through military court. It'll be handled through a separate justice system. And so, as I talked about on the show, I believe last Friday, maybe, there, is a real issue in the military with sexual assault, with like half of women reporting. And, after I did that show, Connor, I had multiple veterans reach out to me and say things like, I would never allow my daughter to join the military because of this reason, and just how rampant and unbelievable that the sexual harassment and assault of women, particularly, but also men in the military is. And so this would be a really important thing to have passed. Now, the DOD is kind of backing this move, but not really. What they're saying is they're willing to set up like a separate process outside of the Pentagon for specifically sexual abuse cases, which is kind of a vague term. Does that include sexual harassment or not, which would be important? However, one of the things that I think would be great about this bill, Connor, is it would move all felonies outside of the military realm. And so that, would do things like maybe war crimes could be prosecuted then in civilian courts, which I think would be important. But also, that would maybe have meant that Chelsea Manning's case, for example, would be held in a civilian court, and then maybe there are more rights for the people accused. So that that's what we're looking at for the NDAA. There are some other things going on in Congress, of course. 30 members of Congress sent Biden a bill saying that, hey, it seems like your Syrian war powers really aren't constitutional. And this is a bipartisan piece of, or not, it's not a piece of legislation, but it's a bipartisan letter signed by Reps Jabal Bowman and Nancy Mace of South Carolina. She's a Republican. She's actually the one that introduced the marijuana legalization bill, and having, the GOP support this kind of legislation and ask these questions in bipartisan bills with people like Jabal Bowman are important to actually getting good things done. So that was a little bit encouraging, but I think overall bad news on the NDAA. I do imagine that they'll pass it either next week or sometime in early December. There's some talk, some concern in like the security establishment that it may not get passed until next year, but that seems really unlikely to me. Connor, anything on all that?
Well, as far as the NDAA goes, we do have some amendments that have been added in the Senate. Well, certainly we have one that passed in the House version of the NDAA from Ro Khanna to end the war in Yemen, or anyway, to end all U.S. assistance or U.S. involvement in supporting Saudi Arabia in that war, which would include so-called defensive. Or, obviously, Biden claimed he was going to end all the offensive operations and support. But this would be any and all assistance. Then this is, like I said, from Representative Ro Khanna. And there's similar language that's been proposed in the or introduced into the Senate NDAA that hasn't passed yet, but that is being pushed by or put forward, I should say, by Senator Bernie Sanders and Edward Markey, the Democrat from Massachusetts. And it's virtually the same language. As far as, but speaking of,
can I just really quickly say, one of the really important things about the NDAA, and while we do spend a lot of time on the show talking about the bill as it's being passed, because there's a lot of really important measures that are going into it, after both houses pass it, the bills are always different. So it goes to conference committee, where a select group of representatives really gets to do what they want with the bill. And so if the House and the Senate bill don't include very similar language on the Yemen war powers, I would imagine it gets stripped out of the final bill and probably gets passed without that language. And so that's really disappointing. But Connor, I